Hi, I'm SlipperPutty. Have you ever wondered about King Sombra? Like how underdeveloped he is, or how little screen time he was given, or how he was basically the typical ordinary villain who got defeated pretty easily? Wait, let me start over. Hi, I'm SlipperPutty. Have you ever wondered about King Sombra? Like if he had actually won the battle over the main six and regained control over the Crystal Empire, what he would do and how he would actually do it? Well, you do now, and that's the kind of story we're looking at today. Today's story is simply entitled Bleak. Written by author Shortstop, it's tagged as a dark and tragedy. It's also currently incomplete and has a word count of about 3,600 words. The description reads,
What if King Sombra had gotten the heart? What was his true purpose? And what will he do with his power restored? All these questions will come to be answered with the king back on his throne.
Well, you've perked up my interest, Shortstop, so let's take a look at Bleak. So we open up right in the middle of the critical scene in Season 3, Episode 2, where a mad dash is taking place to recover the Crystal Heart.
The dark crystal rose higher into the sky, making its way toward the falling dragon and heart-shaped crystal. Riding the spire was the shadow of the former ruler of the kingdom, his eyes focused intently on his prize as he continued to rise up. It had been a 1,000-year escapade to come this far, and finally it was almost within his grasp. Once he had the heart, he could resume where he had left off before his imprisonment. The thought of that alone was driving him to go faster, just to get what he desired.
Already you can see there's a few grammar and spelling errors in this paragraph, and it's going to be like that throughout most of the story. I think the author's done a great job with the build-up, however. He creates an intriguing setting that makes you feel like you're actually there. We get more descriptions on the chase for the heart-shaped gem, and are updated in regards to the other pony's feelings. Shining Armor, for instance, is very emotional at this point.
Shining Armor looked up, not liking what was unfolding in front of him.
I don't like this at all. Nope. Definitely don't like this. At all. Shining Armor then readies himself to throw Cadence in an attempt to save the day.
He knew that there were very few ways to stop this, and he had to act. He held his wife up, knowing that even with her being worn out and utterly exhausted, she was the only one left that could have any chance of getting to the heart first. Whereas Rainbow Dash was fast, they also needed to save Spike.
Why is that sentence about Rainbow Dash in there at all? There's really no need to mention Rainbow Dash at this point. Is the author trying to justify Rainbow Dash for not saving the day for some reason? It's just totally unnecessary and kind of distracts you from the story. We basically go through the same scene that we saw in Season 3, Episode 2, but with the slight twist. Sombra works up some magical energy and hurls it directly at Cadence.
Cadence let out a gasp of horror as she saw what was coming her way. Once Sombra had got his sights set on her, he wasted not time in stopping her.
He wasted not time, but himself.
He released his energy all at once, sending it directly to her. In her weakened state, Cadence couldn't do anything to stop the blast, and simply braced herself for the inevitable impact. As the magic blast hit her, Cadence felt an eruption of pain surge through her body as she was pushed away, sending her back to where she was thrown from.
Personally, I really like this paragraph, given there are a few odd phrase choices, but I think this is a pretty solid description of what's going on. We then turn back to Shining Armor's point of view as he sees Cadence defeated.
"Cadence!" Shining Armor shouted as he watched his wife be launched backwards. Her body went limp after only a few seconds of contact with blasted power, and he feared the worst. As she continued to fall, he hoped and prayed that she would land safely. As her motionless body continued to descend, he knew that she wasn't going to make it back to the balcony. Again, he feared the worst, thinking that he was going to lose his wife. He closed his eyes, not being able to bear even the thought of looking at her as she fell.
There are quite a few things to be said about this paragraph. As a whole, it's just kind of awkward to read. First, the phrase "be launched" sounds a little awkward and could be rewritten. Second, Shining Armor seems to fear the worst twice. Once as Cadence hits the black mass, and again later as she's falling. When did he stop worrying about Cadence in between that point? Did he pause in his worrying when he was hoping and praying that she would be okay? Finally, what kind of heartless stallion has Shining Armor become? Why didn't he do anything to try to save Cadence? I realize that he was powerless with those little black pear sprites on his horn or whatever they were, but I think he would have at least tried something to try to help her. I realize that I'm exploiting this paragraph quite a bit, but it's quite confusing to me as a whole. There are a few other paragraphs as equally confusing, but I'm not going to waste my time critiquing those. As Cadence falls, Rarity tries to soften her fall with her magic. I'm not going to read the 2 paragraphs, but I'm going to let you know that the words slow down become awfully repetitive in those 2 paragraphs. In fact, I think if you slowed your reading pace down every time you came across the words slow down, you'd eventually read those paragraphs in about 10 minutes. To be fair, it's really not a bad description of what's going on, it just needs a better variety in word choice. With Cadence out of the way, we turn back to Sombra.
Good, now that pest is out of the way, Sombra thought to himself. He then focused his attention back to his goal. The heart was almost close enough to reach out and touch. Not wishing to take another chance with anything, he used his magic to grab the falling crystal, bringing it to his face.
Why didn't he just grab it in the first place? It would have saved him a ton of trouble.
He smiled wickedly. He had waited over 1,000 years for this moment. 1,000 years trapped in the ice, and now he had back what was his. He now had everything back, and then some.
He now had everything back and then some? What's that supposed to mean?
Oh, I had everything. Then I had something. That wasn't everything. But it was something.
Sombra suddenly notices that he's caught Spike in his magic.
He looked over and saw that he had caught the small dragon in his grasp as well. Sombra at first entertained the thought of simply throwing him aside, or even having some fun with him. But for the time being, he had far more important things to deal with.
Seriously, why did you throw away the opportunity to mess with Spike? He deserves it. He's always getting into trouble. It's really time that somebody taught him a lesson. And no, I'm not suggesting that somebody make a Spike gorefic. No. Sombra eventually does have his fun with Spike, as it seems that Spike has actually pleased him.
You need not worry, for you have done me no wrong, Sombra told him in a calm manner. You've brought me that which is the key to my kingdom, and for that I thank you. Spike's jaw dropped, unable to comprehend what was happening. Not only was he under the control of the most feared stallion in all of this city, but he was also thanking him for making a stupid mistake.
At first, by the wording, it sounds like Spike is thanking Sombra for his mistakes, but after a reread or 2, we can see that it's the opposite way. On that note, it's about time that we thanked Spike for his stupid mistakes. He makes them in every single episode he's in, for crying out loud. In fact, if I had a nickel for every time that Spike made a stupid mistake in this show, I'd have a lot of nickels. Sombra decides to forget Spike for a while because he realizes that there's actually stuff going on below him.
We'll discuss your reward later, but first, Sombra said, looking back to the heart he held in his magic, a little reunion with my kingdom. He looked closely at the heart, marveling at his prize. All those years spent in the ice, he thought to himself. All that time of waiting, and it's finally paid off. I have back my physical form. I have the crystal heart, and I have my empire. His eyes shifted to the sight below him, a group of ponies all gathered around an unconscious mare. Ah, of course, he thought aloud.
Of course, I've been too busy monologuing with this petty dragon that I've forgotten that I still need to get rid of those ponies below me who might still have a chance to defeat me at any chance they might get. Irrelevant. Seriously though, what is this reward that Sombra has promised to Spike? Would this eventually make Spike turn evil or something? This side of the story has some interesting potential if the author can develop it well enough. Sombra turns to make some proclamations to the public down below about how great he is and a whole bunch of other villainy-type crap that I'm too lazy to read. The citizens of the Crystal Empire, however, are surprised that Sombra doesn't hold anything against them for imprisoning him.
No, you were not the ones to do that to me. I know who the true cause of my imprisonment is. But you need not worry yourselves about such matters. I know you are all anxious to resume your work.
I'm going to assume that he's specifically talking about Celestia and Luna imprisoning him about 1,000 years ago. I guess I'm really not surprised that Sombra isn't blaming the citizens of the Crystal Empire. But hey, if I was frozen for 1,000 years, I'd pretty much blame anybody. Like a lot of politicians out there. By the way, has anyone noticed that Celestia's spells seem to only last for about 1,000 years until they weaken for some reason? Why can't that goddess make her spells eternal for Pete's sake? So Sombra continues on with his evil dialogue.
I have reclaimed my kingdom, he said to no one in particular, and now it is time for me to take my seat back on the throne.
No one in particular? You were just talking to a whole crowd. But we don't have time to question that for long as he turns back to Spike and tells him to hang on.
In a split second, King Sombra's eyes turned that vile green color. The ground below started to shake, and Sombra gave a very toothy, evil smile.
I don't know if it's just me, but when the author keeps mentioning Sombra's smile throughout the story, I keep thinking of this. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. I'm a strange, demented person. So Sombra grows some big black crystals out of the ground, turns to Spike and says,
Get ready for a ride.
That sounded horribly wrong. Oh well. Shippers, begin shipping! And then they kissed. Perfect!
Before Spike even had time to react, Sombra launched himself off the crystal's top and began falling. Spike gripped the back of his insane captor, not wishing to fall off. He let out a loud yell of fear, wondering if the king had completely lost his mind.
I'm curious, why is Spike still wondering about Sombra's sanity at this point? I mean, seriously, what is he thinking right now? Ah, help! I'm holding on to this evil king who I think has completely lost his mind! Well, I don't know for sure. Maybe he has, I don't know. Ha! So Sombra and Spike have a pseudo-ski session down the tall black crystals, with Spike trembling all the while. I kind of feel that the description of the jumping about is somewhat unnecessary. Why not take that time to get inside Sombra's mind and see what he's thinking or how much power he has at this moment? Oh, and speaking of Spike, he's completely scared right now. Gee, Spike, do you think Sombra's completely insane by now?
Well, I don't know. I think that's kind of debatable. I mean, he's not all the way, but I don't think
Shut
that there's
up!
a... Oh, okay.
Sombra finally comes face to face with the main six, who each express different feelings toward him. We even get a description of the amazingly emotional shining armor at this tragic moment.
The male unicorns simply looked discouraged, but tried to keep a facade of confidence and focus.
Seriously, all this crap is happening and all he can do is look discouraged?
Well, my wife almost died. I did nothing to save her, and it looks like the Crystal Empire is practically screwed. This is so discouraging.
Also, Pinkie Pie is displaying some odd emotion.
The pink earth pony simply sat there, a guilty-looking smile on her face as she stared at him with large eyes.
Why is Pinkie smiling guiltily? Is she in cahoots with Sombra or something? Sombra greets the group, and then we get two contrasting descriptions about Sombra's appearance.
The way he stood was that of someone in a controlling, dominant nature. And his eyes. Oh, those eyes. Those cold, soulless, unforgiving eyes. Eyes that could freeze lava with just one passing glance.
Did you catch the difference in quality there? The first one was just bland. It was like reading, "The way that he smiled was that of someone who had a large gap between his two front teeth and had a broken lower jaw." The description about the eyes, however, was fantastic. It makes him sound really cool, and thankfully it's at the end of the paragraph, so you kind of forget about the bland description in the way he stands. Turning back to face the crowd, Sombra has yet another announcement to make.
"I do hope you've enjoyed your time off, my slaves," he announced, almost shaking the balcony as his voice boomed. "But I am sorry to say that there will be no more breaks for some time. After all, idle hooves are Discord's playthings."
I'm very curious as to how Sombra knew about Discord, and more specifically, what he thinks about him. Does he think Discord is a good inspiration, or somebody bad that should be avoided? Did Discord influence him to do any of the things that resulted in his banishment for a millennia? Who was banished first, Discord or Sombra? I'd really like to see someone answer those questions, whether it be in this story or another story. In the end, Sombra finally takes some extra precautions and regains what appears to be full control over the Crystal Empire once again.
"Get ready, children," he said, his voice almost sounding like an ambient echo. "For this is merely the prelude of what is truly to come." Finally, the shadow-like vapor of the spell sealed the city in, not to be seen again by the outside world.
And that, fillies and gentlecolts, is where it gets real. And that's all that's currently written of Bleak. It was pretty impressive, but it did have a few drawbacks. I'll start off by saying that I really like the way that this fic is headed. First is taking the character of King Sombra, who really wasn't that developed in the show, and giving him some solid character traits and a chance to be his true self. If the author decides to continue writing this story, I'll be very interested to see how Sombra develops as a true character. There's just so much room to work with Sombra that I think, if he's handled well, he can turn into a really diabolical character. In my view, however, there are two main drawbacks to this story. First, the spelling and the grammar. It's one of the most basic mistakes in any story, and like a lot of other people, I really just don't like it. There were errors throughout the story, and while I was still able to figure out what was going on, it was confusing and annoying at certain points. Second, some of the descriptions were kind of bland. Some of them could have been more colorful and inventive, and actually a lot of them were, but you could definitely notice when they weren't. On a similar note, some of the descriptions were a bit redundant. Sometimes there would be paragraphs back to back that felt like they were telling you the same thing, just slightly worded differently. Just as a side note, I really don't read too many dark or tragedy fics. I'm usually drawn to stories that involve comedy or random humor, so I really don't read these kind of fics that often, and I don't know how to judge them as well as I should. But I'm glad I went out of my way to read this one, because I think it was worth my time. Yeah, it had its drawbacks, but they're really not that bad. They can be fixed easily. Overall, I give this story a rating of 7 out of 10 slippers. I really like the concept for the story, and it's perked my interest enough to watch out for new developments. But don't let me be the King Sombra of your fanfiction opinions. Go check out this story yourself by following the link provided in the description below. Let Shortstop know what you liked about the story, and if there's any way that you think he can improve it. I honestly know nothing. I'm just sitting here proclaiming my opinion and eating Lucky Charms. That was my product plug, by the way. I do encourage you to check out the story, though. It's pretty well done. Oh, one more quick thing to mention before I'm finished. I want to send out my many thanks to my new production team consisting of Opalberries, Pinky Primus, and Wargame Brony. They are some awesome gentlemen who will be helping me critique the stories that I'll be reviewing each week. They gave me some great help with this episode, and I'm looking forward to working with them in the future. You can also check them out by following the links to their Fanfiction accounts below. Again, these guys helped me see some stuff that I didn't see in the first time that I read the story, so kudos to them. So until next time, and most of the other next times, I'm SlipperPutty. May King Sombra bless you with all of his joy, and don't forget to brush your teeth.